and this plant gets the food by the process of photosynthesis. Now, we also know that all living organisms, they need energy, and we derive that energy by oxidation of food. Okay, so here we all need energy, and we get this energy by taking the food in, and then this energy produced through the breakdown of food is used to drive the metabolic process in our body for our survival. So now, how are we able to obtain this energy from the food? And this is possible by a process called as respiration. Okay, so today we are going to look at the chapter number 14, respiration in plants. So let us look at the definition of respiration. So respiration is the breakdown of carbon to carbon bond of a complex compound like glucose through oxidation within the cell, leading to release of considerable amount of energy, and that energy is used to trap, or you can say that energy is used to synthesize the currency of energy called as ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So what happens during respiration? During respiration, the compound complex like glucose is broken down so that the energy release is used to synthesize the currency of energy, that is ATP. So ATP is the currency of energy. Next, respiratory substrates. So these are the compounds which are oxidized during respiration, and one of the important or the major respiratory substrate is glucose. Protein can also act as respiratory substrate when it is broken down to release energy. Fats also act as a respiratory substrate, but the major respiratory substrate is the glucose. Well, now respiration in plant. So during respiration, first of all, there should be before the respiration takes place inside the cell, there should be an exchange of gas. And in living organisms like human, the exchange of gas occurs through breathing. The exchange of gas occurs through breathing. Exchange of gas in our body, that is exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. Okay, occurs through breathing. Now, here we are talking about respiration in plant. So that means to say, for the plant cells to undergo respiration, do they breathe? The question is, do plants breathe? So what do you think? Of course, they don't breathe like animals, like us, because of three important reasons. First of all, the demand for oxygen is less than the animals. So they don't need much of oxygen for the respiration. What they do is, most of the time, of course they do respiration, but most of the time they are focused in building up of the body parts for the storage and for the growth. And the second one is, all part of the plant, they meet the requirement by themselves. But in the case of animals, for example, the cells in our stomach, the cells in our finger, and every part which when are born, we get the oxygen through the circulation, which again is through the diffusion occurring in the lungs, and in the lungs again is because of the breathing. But in the case of plants, they meet their own requirement. Each cell meet their own requirement, and we know that during the process of photosynthesis, one of the byproduct is oxygen. Okay, and that oxygen is used for the cellular respiration. Now the third one is they have an opening. They have an opening through which the exchange of gas takes place. For example, on the leaf, the openings are stomata. So this stomata is the opening through which the exchange of gas takes place. So the stomata on leaves, and also there are certain openings present on the bark of the stems, we call it as lenticels. On stems, provide a site for exchange of gas. Okay, so exchange of gases. So exchange of gas here means oxygen, the gases are, okay, we are focusing on the carbon dioxide and oxygen. Okay, so during the respiration, they need oxygen. And during photosynthesis, they need carbon dioxide. Okay, so these are the three reasons why the plant will not breathe like animal. Okay. Now next is, we shall talk about again the respiration in plants. This respiration can take place in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen. So depending upon the situation, we have two types of respiration. Okay. Aerobic respiration. Just look at, let's say, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration. It occurs in the presence of oxygen. So here it occurs in the absence of oxygen. Second one is, during aerobic respiration, there is a complete breakdown of glucose. Here it is incomplete breakdown of glucose. So we know that glucose are the respiratory substrates which are oxidized, which are broken down to get energy. Okay, so aerobic respiration, it occurs in the presence of oxygen. Here it occurs in the absence of oxygen. Second one is, here there is a complete breakdown of glucose and here incomplete breakdown of glucose. So from here itself you can see that there are more energy. More energy is produced during aerobic respiration. Here lesser energy. So here the energy here refers to ATP here. So here the product of aerobic respiration is 36 ATP. And here it is only 2 ATP. ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Okay, so in an organism, okay, like us, usually we undergo aerobic respiration, but in some part of our body, during certain situation, it might undergo anaerobic respiration. Likewise, yeast and other microorganisms, they can either undergo aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration, and so does in the plant. Okay, so respiration is categorized depending upon the process taking place in the presence or absence of oxygen. Well, now let us first look at anaerobic respiration. Okay, so we know that anaerobic respiration is a respiration taking place in the absence of oxygen. So this anaerobic respiration, for the respiration, here we are talking about the cellular respiration. Respiration taking place inside a cell. So this respiration, anaerobic respiration, occurs in cytoplasm. Occurs in cytoplasm of a cell. It occurs in the cytoplasm of a cell. And this anaerobic respiration involves first step, that is glycolysis. And this glycolysis also takes place in aerobic respiration. So glycolysis is a step, it is a reaction which is 10 steps reaction, which is common in both aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration. Okay, so this glycolysis, I'll just write to summarize part of it. So during glycolysis, glucose undergoes a 10-step reaction. 10-step reaction and finally give rise to pyruvic acid. Okay, so this is a 10-step reaction and finally giving rise to a pyruvic acid. And we know if you count the number of carbon here, it is 6 carbon compound. Finally breaking down into pyruvic acid, pyruvic is 3 carbon compound. Pyruvic acid has only 3 carbon compound. So here it clearly shows that when glucose is broken down, we get 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Okay, so this glycolysis, it starts with the glucose and the products are 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. Okay. Now next is, second step here you can find is fermentation. So this pyruvic acid can either undergo lactic acid fermentation or alcoholic fermentation depending upon the organism and the situation. So we have fermentation. So this pyruvic acid, in this case, pyruvic acid can either undergo lactic acid fermentation or alcohol fermentation. Okay, so this pyruvic acid, 3 carbon compound, here I have shown only 1, but there are 2 from 1 glucose. So this, if it undergoes lactic acid fermentation, it leads to production of lactic acid. And if it undergoes alcoholic fermentation, it leads to production of ethanol and a molecule of carbon dioxide. So ethanol is C2H5OH and a molecule of carbon dioxide. So you can see that during anaerobic respiration, glucose breaks down into pyruvic acid. And this pyruvic acid undergoes a lactic acid fermentation and gives rise to lactic acid. And here, if it undergoes alcoholic fermentation, then we get ethanol and a molecule of carbon dioxide. So all these steps involves the role of enzyme. We know that enzymes are biocatalysts which enhance or which speed up the rate of reaction. Okay, so there are multiple enzymes involved in both the type of reaction, and here again let us come back here. During the process of glycolysis, energies are released and these are, let us say, they are a net of 2 ATP and 2 NADH. So during this process, these two energy forms are produced, 2 ATP and 2 NADH. Now, during fermentation, here NADH is used to reduce pyruvic acid into lactic acid. So we have NAD plus here. So here each pyruvic acid utilizes each of the NADH. Likewise, for the alcoholic fermentation, again NADH is used to reduce pyruvic acid in the formation of ethanol. Okay, so this is about the anaerobic respiration. Now here, pyruvic acid here, okay, lactic acid fermentation, it also occurs in our body, okay, in the muscles. Okay, and then alcoholic fermentation, the common example you know is that of yeast, which is used to produce wines and other alcoholic products. Okay, now let us look at the amount of energy produced. Okay, so glycolysis, this step we will be talking in detail when we talk about aerobic respiration. It is same. So I just go quickly here. So glucose broken down to form a 2 molecule of pyruvic acid. What we get is 2 ATP and 2 NADH. But in the next step, that is fermentation, if it undergoes this step reaction, what we get is NADH synthesized during glycolysis is utilized. It is utilized in the reduction of pyruvic acid to form lactic acid here. And even if it undergoes alcoholic fermentation, again one NADH is utilized for pyruvic acid. Okay, so all in all, the net gain of the energy is only 2 ATP. So the net gain or the total or the net energy produced during the process of anaerobic is very less. It is only 2 ATP. Okay. Now next, we shall talk about aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, as discussed, it also involves glycolysis, and this aerobic respiration, of course, the glycolysis takes place in cytoplasm, and for the aerobic respiration to take place, we need an important organelle which we call as powerhouse of a cell. What is that? It is a mitochondria. So let us just look at the overall picture of this aerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration involves, first one is glycolysis, and this glycolysis, what it does is it breaks the glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, and of course during this process energy is released. So the net gain or the net energy is 2 ATP, and second one we have Krebs cycle. Before that we have a step called as decarboxylation, wherein pyruvic acid, which is 3 carbon compound here, become acetyl CoA by dioxide, and of course here the energy produced are NAD. Next is Krebs cycle. So Krebs cycle or TCA dicarboxylic acid cycle or citric acid cycle. Okay, so in this case acetyl CoA enters into the cycle, and this finally is in a stepwise direction where it leads to the release of these two carbon dioxide, and also there is a synthesis of energy in the form of NADH, in the form of ATP, and then FADH2. Okay. So these are the steps here. First one is glycolysis, decarboxylation, and then entry into the Krebs cycle, wherein this Krebs cycle starts with the acetyl-CoA and finally broken down into two molecules of carbon dioxide and release of these different forms of energy. And next is electron transport chain. Electron transport chain. So during this, what happens is that NADH and FADH2 are oxidized to electron transport chain, and this oxidation releases some energy, and that energy is used for the phosphorylation, that is synthesis of ATP, and here it is oxidative phosphorylation, and this involves the binding of adenosine diphosphate plus inorganic phosphate in the formation of ATP, which is the currency of energy. Okay, so this is the overall steps involved in aerobic respiration. So first one is glycolysis, and it takes place in cytoplasm. It takes place in cytoplasm, and this glucose is finally broken down into two molecules of pyruvic acid, and this pyruvic acid, which is present in the cytoplasm, is transported into mitochondria through the mitochondrial membrane. So next step here, decarboxylation. It takes place in mitochondria matrix of the mitochondria. Okay, and then Krebs cycle also takes place in the matrix of mitochondria. Okay, now next, ETC, electron transport chain. It occurs in the inner membrane of mitochondria. We know that mitochondria has two layers. It is a two-layered or two membranous layer structure. Okay, that is outer membrane and inner membrane. And the inner membrane here contains all the electron carriers, okay, which helps in the oxidation of this NADH and FADH2 and releasing the energy, and which is utilized during oxidative phosphorylation. So this is the overall picture of it, and we shall discuss one by one in a step-by-step.